Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another special episode of the Kahlu podcast. I'm your host, Sai Guy. Today we sit down for an in-depth conversation that navigate through the trials and tribulations of life's most challenging moments. Our podcast is a tapestry of human resilience, a place where laughter and stories light up even the darkest of times. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest, Dr. Azeem Elahi. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. So a doctor in the medical field. Tell us about your background.
Well, I was born in just outside of Toronto, Canada.
Okay.
That's where I was brought up. But my medical training and sort of family life brought me down here into the United States. So I completed residency and fellowship training in pulmonary and critical care medicine here in the US.
Okay.
And so from there, I started my practice. So pulmonary is treating lung diseases, and critical care is essentially working in the intensive care unit. So when patients are stabilized from the emergency room or they need close care after a surgery, they're oftentimes admitted to an intensive care unit.
Got it. So pulmonary, the ICU section of pulmonary care in facilities, in medical facilities. You recently came up at a recent event in the Carolinas where I think it was Mother's Day. We had a previous brother on the podcast that mentioned the amazing work that you did, and you are a volunteer with one of the organizations that went to Gaza to help the folks out there. I wanted to hear your story. Tell us about what led you to that decision to volunteer for the folks in Gaza.
You know, there's multiple ways to answer that. I would say from a holistic standpoint, it was a calling for me. Um, I remember early on watching the devastation after October 7 and feeling so directly affected by the sights, the sounds, and the cries for help that we were seeing. And what we saw was footage from people on the ground sharing what exactly was happening, which for some reason was a contrast to what was being portrayed on mainstream media. So for me, if I answered it from that holistic standpoint, I truly just felt as though it was an opportunity given to me, and I either had to take action on it and offer myself in a way that you couldn't do it in any other way but to show up and be there with the people in Gaza in solidarity, or I had to do it in words. And I preferred in that moment to take action. Now, from a purely logistical standpoint, it's difficult getting into Gaza. So you certainly need an organization, an organization that has experience going to Gaza, navigating the various checks that need to be in place to enter Gaza, and has the connections within Gaza to be able to travel and work in the capacity that we want to be able to help in. And so I found that with Imana, and they were setting out their first trip after October 7, and it was a dedicated medical mission relief trip. And to start off, they wanted to make sure that the team was very small, concentrated. And the chair for Imana Medical Relief wanted a critical care physician. So I got a text message saying, hey, I've got a team assembling to go to Gaza. He wanted a surgeon. He wanted an emergency room doctor, and he himself is an anesthesiologist. And so that formed our core of this team that we felt would be as impactful as possible to the people in Gaza, especially in the healthcare setting.
It sounds like there was a lot of red tape. News articles showing that doctors that were in there, they either had a way to either get in or a way to get out because the time frame is it's a hit or miss. It's play by ear. It happens when it happens. If you go, we say we need you to go or we need you to come. This is the moment. You got to move. You got to move quick. And as I've learned in the medical field, things in the medical field don't work like that. They don't go, okay, it's happening now. Go, go, go. It's certain cases, but not all the time. So that's amazing that you found this opportunity. The organization was assembling a team, and then you were able to get out there. So yeah,
That point is so relevant. Anything could go wrong. Any check could go sort of unbalanced,
yeah,
and it'll affect downstream anything you had prepared. And so, in forming this team, our chairperson of the medical relief organization really had to, sort of impose on us that, listen, things are not going to always go our way. We have to be flexible. We have to be adaptable. And, if I told you how many doors were closed on my journey into Gaza, you'd be shocked into understanding how it was even possible that we made it through.
subhanallah. I feel like we can spend a whole hour talking about the commute, how to get there, but we I don't want to take too much of your time. But let's fast forward. So we're in Gaza, right? I'm assuming the organization was let in. You found a way in, and through the right channels, through the approved channels, and you're there. What was your first destination? Was this the northern part? Was this in Rafah? What area were you stationed in?
So most medical convoys, I shouldn't say most, all medical convoys have been entering through Rafah crossing. That takes us into southern Gaza, right into Rafah, exactly. And so you cross through Rafah, and we entered into Khan Yunis, which is just the southern tip of Khan Yunis, where European Gaza Hospital is.
Got it.
That's actually where we were stationed the entire time we were there. So we made a couple trips outside of the hospital, but our main focus, our main area where we were working was European Gaza Hospital in Khan Yunis. It's right at the border between Rafah and Khan Yunis.
Got it. So that's the European hospital. Got it. So you're there. So in the facility, I'm sure it's not the best facility in the world. It's there to serve a purpose. Um, you're there as a pulmonary physician in a crowded setting. What are your responsibilities? Like you're there. I mean, are you assigned? Is there a board? I mean, is there a system in place? I mean, walk us through that.
So your entry is coordinated with the Ministry of Health in Palestine,
Okay.
and in doing so, you're permitted sort of a coordination between other medical teams that are there and coordination between the other hospitals outside of where we were initially established. So there are sites outside of European Gaza Hospital, such as Al Aqsa Hospital in Deir al Balah. There's also the field hospitals in Rafah, where some teams can be stationed. So there's a Kuwaiti hospital there, there's an Emirati hospital there, and then there's some field hospitals. A lot of the information I share with you is current as of 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
And then, as you know, much has changed after Rafah invasion and the incursion into East Rafah and now into Central Rafah. So a lot of those hospital situations have actually evolved in the last 3 weeks since I've returned. My responsibilities at European Hospital were between the intensive care unit and the emergency room. So in the mornings, we kind of joined the intensive care unit team there. So there's junior doctors there. Each team also has a more senior doctor, and they form rotating teams. So each day they try to rotate, and that's really obviously to create some way of sustainability in dealing with, how do we handle 220 plus days of ongoing bombardment, ongoing surplus of patients coming into the hospital. you mentioned sort of how busy and how occupied that hospital might be. The entire hospital campus site, it's estimated that there were 30,000 displaced people living on site or within the corridors of the hospital. And that's changed a little bit over the past 2 weeks. But when we were there, you know, thousands of people on site and hundreds of people within the actual hospital corridors. So you're trying to negotiate how you take care of patients amidst all of that.
No, you're saying 30,000
Keeping
living on quarters. Are those injured individuals or are folks seeking shelter? Because how do you differentiate?
Correct, yeah. So they are internally displaced persons. So,
Okay.
as the barrage occurred from the north down into central Gaza, more and more um, people and patients were displaced into southern Gaza. And Rafah, having essentially a displaced population of about 1.5 million altogether, European Hospital is the main tertiary hospital and almost the remaining tertiary hospital left to take care of that large population of displaced people.
Yeah.
So it's a busy place because of its proximity to where all of these civilians in Gaza were told or mandated to evacuate to. But it's busy because it's a hospital setting, and so there's electricity and there's some water and there's some security and having access to all of that.
Yeah. That's, I see what you mean. So you're trying to pick and you're trying to decide who you should pick, the different responsibilities that you have to choose and navigate through. Those are some trials and tribulations for sure. Um, I want to ask you, what are the what when going through all the individuals, what were some of the toughest decisions you had to make? How do you choose from Abdullah or Muhammad? What are the rate factors?
That's a great question because you're right. There's obviously quite a bit of rationing of resources when you're dealing with a large volume of patients entering the hospital, a large volume of patients that are being taken care of in the hospital, and all of that in the setting of having minimal resources to take care of these situations. I can tell you nightly and even throughout the day, we heard and felt bombings. These bombings were typically in Rafah, which is about 25 kilometers away from where we were. And you could tell based on your watch, how soon after you'd hear those patients would come into the emergency department. Now, in the emergency room, especially in the evenings, even though we weren't all emergency medicine physicians, we united as a team in the evenings and we'd walk together, the four of us, into the emergency room and help the local team and help Dr. Chowdhury, who was our emergency room physician. There were nightly scenarios where you had families come in or parts of families come in, meaning a father might have been stuck under rubble, couldn't make it into the ambulance. An uncle had died en route, a child had died en route, and who we had in the trauma bay were the remaining family members that survived a blast. Those remaining family members were critically ill. Typically, some had minor injuries, abrasions, scratches, some cuts. They needed sutures. Those were the lucky ones. Others had shrapnel injuries, traumatic brain injuries, such trauma that it caused bleeding in the brain or bleeding inside the organs, shrapnel causing vascular injuries that led to significant bleeding and such. Those were the unlucky patients. Some came in nearly dead, and you're trying your best to revive them. Just as you pointed out, the local teams were certainly much better at identifying how to use resources. They certainly knew, of course, which patients had a chance of survival and which didn't. And so we used their local guidance to kind of help steer us into where we should be of most use. There are such limitations that you could talk about it for an hour from a medical perspective because equipment that's needed, breathing tubes and oxygen tubing and IV tubing and IV fluids and antibiotics and medications that stop bleeding and surgeons and anesthesiologists and space in an operating room and a CT scanner, an MRI scanner, an ultrasound. All of these things take resources. And when you have 10 people come in at once, it it truly exacerbates an already strained healthcare system and exacerbates an already strained healthcare physician and nursing team and a tech team. All of this truly exacerbates a healthcare system that's collapsed. And it does end up causing a fair bit of decision making about which patients should we triage to get the care that they need.
I mean, I'm sure you mentioned it earlier, the local physicians in these clinics in the hospitals, they are the best at deciding. It sounds like they are aware of, okay, we know what we have, we know what we can treat, we can assess the success rate of what we can do based off of what we have, and that's it's very sad to hear. It's very sad to hear. The local physician, the local doctors, the local emergency room, the surgeons, the paramedics, all the healthcare teams that are making this happen. I want to say they are accustomed, right? This war has been happening for the last X amount of months. And I mean, even before that, I'm sure there's been bombardments. There's been these small microscopic issues that keep coming out every now and then. But as an outsider coming in, when you hear a building's been demolished, right, or a bomb's been dropped, or a block's been leveled, I don't think you usually hear that coming from whichever area that you're coming from. What goes through your mind? You're in the hospital bed, in the room. You're trying to assess, and then lights flicker. The block 2 blocks down just got leveled. What? I mean, I'm just thinking about the emotional, psychological stress. Hey, did I make a mistake coming here? What am I doing?
The first night we were there, you quickly realize you're not only going to hear these blasts, they're so intense and they're so powerful that some of them you actually feel. You just like you pointed out, the room shakes, your core shakes because not all of us have been to a combat zone before. Not all of us have been in a war zone, and I had never been to a war zone. So hearing live ammunition, hearing a bomb blast truly was a shocking experience. Now, I will also say, I think there's something about being in Gaza, being on the hospital site, being with my team that gave me this sense of security because I felt as though I was protected. But in the same way, these are very strange sounds and feelings. And so it is really hard not to think about, who's going to be a target next. And when you work with the local doctors and the local healthcare team, they work every day with that thought in the back of their mind. It doesn't stop them, however. They show up every day. They're not compensated either. Most of these healthcare teams are volunteers or they've shown up in solidarity to protect one another, to have a dignified work day, to contribute to their community and to their service to God. And so they, knowing that every single day they too could potentially be a target, still show up every day, e- each day, as they have for the last 230 plus days and years prior to that. As a foreign doc there, yes, it's a bizarre experience to hear and feel bomb blasts. Can't say that they were 2 blocks away from me, but when we drove just outside of the hospital campus, when we were driving to Aqsa Hospital, for example, to take supplies there, the degree of devastation you see just 5 minutes outside of the hospital campus is hard to describe. When you see the videos, you truly see everything attacked, everything blasted. There's nothing untouched. There's no sense of indiscriminate bombings. Every building that you see when you leave the hospital site to Aqsa Hospital, which is in Deir al-Bala, 30 minutes, is destroyed. Schools, warehouses, UNRWA food storage facilities, gas stations, masjids, anything that you see, obviously homes, buildings, anything that you are able to see with your eyes from that main road is destroyed. These are images that you can't help but process in your mind and wonder, how safe am I here? But it's a strange way of saying this, but I didn't really question that until I returned home and to the comfort of my family and my children and my home, that you really processed any of that. While I was there, I just felt like I was there for a short amount of time and I was there to make the impact for that short amount of time. And I had to do whatever I needed to do during that time with my team. And I didn't really put that at the forefront of my mind. Any sort of fear of, would we be targets?
That's I I commend you, Dr. Azeem. Um,
But think about that. Think about that for the local doctors, right? This is me just for 9 days. But think about that as the local doctors, and they've seen what's happened to hospitals in the north. They've seen what happened to Shifa Hospital. They saw what happened to Nasser Hospital. As we were there, they're uncovering mass graves on the hospital campus sites, and they are there every single day serving. Subhanallah.
yeah, I'm a loss for words. Wallahi, I'm at loss for words. I don't know if this is true. I was watching Al Jazeera, and they're saying that they're capturing doctors and healthcare professionals, and they're putting them in prison. I don't know how true that is. You just mentioned, think about the locals that are actually there. Well, according to Al Jazeera, the locals that are actually there are being imprisoned. To my knowledge, every single facility has been hit. Every single hospital has been hit with some sort of bomb, or it's been raided or something. It's been decommissioned. And I don't know what the goal is. Like when they're moving and creating healthcare sites or campsites for emergency situations, and you see the tents because all the hospitals have been completely evacuated or bombed or destroyed. The apocalyptic views that I see on the TV match your description as you're saying them. So it's like, what? Well, when do you think it's going to stop? When the war officially ends? When the borders open up? Will this end? I mean, from a healthcare professional standpoint, for somebody that wants to give advice of somebody in Gaza, what do you tell them? You tell them there's hope. You tell them there's an exit. It's happening soon. What do you predict?
That's it's a multi-million-dollar question. And when you're there and when you stay in touch with the healthcare teams that you've connected with on your return home, you obviously share your prayers with them, and you share with them that we have communities back home that are thinking of them and praying for them nonstop. And that's fact, that's true. When this will all end, it is so hard to predict because there are such strong forces in the West that seem to wish for this to continue. And I don't see any sort of end anytime soon. When you look at the current situation in Rafah, this was initially deemed a red line. So when you heard from our politicians, when you heard from our president and our vice president, the invasion into Rafah was considered a red line, and it was cited as such
Mm-hmm.
many times.
Absolutely.
Now it's softened. Now it's saying a different words, but a serious invasion into Rafah. I'm not sure how much more serious you can get when the single area, Rafah crossing, between Egypt into Gaza has been taken over. That was the single port of entry for the medical convoys like us, who had just returned 3 weeks earlier. It was a single port of entry for us carrying these numerous huge duffel bags full of supplies to lend aid to the local healthcare teams. Beyond that, now you've had people who are camped out in East Rafah, Central Rafah, and West Rafah who are being asked to displace or evacuate yet again. I cannot tell you how many times I heard from the local civilians, from the local healthcare personnel, that they haven't displaced just once or twice or 3 times or 4 times or 5 times. Many of these people have been displaced 6, 7, 8 times already. They've come from the north, they've come from central Gaza, they've been in certain parts of Gaza, which is not a huge amount of land, it's a
It's
small
not big.
territory.
Yeah.
So when you ask these people to displace yet again on such short notice, less than 24 hours, there's these leaflets dropping. This invasion into Rafah has already crossed the red line that's been expressed numerous times. I don't know how to answer that question about when this will end. All I know is that we have to continue to have trust in God and have faith in God because that's what the people in Palestine have, and that's how they persevere. And that's how they demonstrate their resilience day to day. They have such strong faith that what they are doing is right and that they're protected by a stronger power. And that's
Amen.
the only way to answer that question is with some vague uncertainty about when, but knowing that there's some type of ultimate divine answer that will emerge to answer that.
Inshallah. And I hope folks that go back to Rabbna does not forget them, and they won't forget them. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen.
I mean,
Dr. Azeem, I want to thank you from me personally for going out to Gaza and supporting the citizens of Gaza in Palestine. I thank you for everything that you've done, the sacrifices that you've done, leaving the comfort of your home and going into a war zone, an active war zone, and giving the healthcare treatments to all the people that you could. My last question, and I'll let you go. Is there something you wish you did better before or after leaving Gaza?
I have a personal belief, which is that I'm a student of life. I'm a student perpetually. And so I, ask myself that question every night, every morning, is there something I could have done better? 100% yes. I could have made stronger connections. I could have gone to the emergency room an hour earlier. I could have spent an extra hour teaching the local team portable ultrasound. Um, we could have distributed medications in a different way. Um, I could have taken more pictures. You realize that some of these memories over time, they begin to blur because there's such a shared experience there. Um,
Fast paced too. It's hard to remember things when they're going a million miles an hour.
yeah, yeah. So there are countless things that I wish I did better. Um, but inshallah, my intentions were to go there and do good and to be helpful to my team and to be helpful to the local doctors and the nurses and the techs that are there and to come in with supplies and to share the du'as, the prayers that my community and my family shared with me to relay to those people there. And I can say humbly that at the very least I was able to accomplish that.
That's amazing. One last thing I want to ask you, and I promise this will be the last question. Um, if there's other physicians or doctors or surgeons looking to make this volunteer opportunity to help real world, real life situations, and they're uncertain, where can they go? Where can they? What can you tell them that will help ease their anxiousness on? Hey, you know what? It's not as bad as you think, or it is as bad as you think, but you gain X, Y, Z from it. What's a message that you'd send to them?
I think if we have healthcare professionals who want to volunteer their time and expertise and compassion to the people of Gaza or Palestine or anywhere else in the world where there's need, there are numerous places across the globe where we have innocent people who are being marginalized and who do not have access to the care they need. Realize that it's your intentions to help that transcends anything else. I do get questions frequently, Doc, I'm this and this type of physician. Will I be helpful there? The answer almost always is yes. But it does take a certain person to be able to be helpful there. What you don't want to be when you get to Gaza is a patient. You don't want to be the one who needs the care. You want to be the one providing the care. And so oftentimes what you'll see are from the teams that are going to Gaza are people who have been on humanitarian mission trips in the past. Certainly people who have traveled to Gaza in the past has been a valuable asset. But none of these are requirements. It takes your intentions, it takes your adaptability, it takes your willingness to just do a good service to Allah, to humanity, to leave behind any sort of preconceived comfort that you expected to have and be able to function in complete unknown, which is how we prepared.
That's amazing. Definitely grounding for sure. Well, Dr. Azeem, you've been amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. Folks, if you have any questions for the doc about Gaza, about Palestine, about things that went down, put it in the comments. Don't be scared. It's an open forum. We'll sit down again for part 2 and answer all your questions. So don't hesitate to reach out. Dr. Azeem, you've been wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today.